Hello, hi everybody, happy to see you all again. So, in our journey of starting your own side project, we've seen two things on how to validate your idea, how to spread it to the audience, get their feedback, see if the idea is worth building. So, I'm considering you've watched all those videos, I think a couple of videos around that. If you haven't watched it, please go see it from the link above. So now the second phase, considering you have figured out an idea which is worth building. From this phase, there is going to be a lot of things like, you could be a technical person, you could be a designer, you could be someone who is into selling it, sales, a marketer, whatever it is. You might not have all the skills that is required for your side project, but still, how can you do it as a side project, find someone and then still go with it? After validating your business idea, the step number 2 is designing the product. Now you don't have to be like a pro designer who is aesthetically knowing everything, who is user experience expert or anything of that sort. You can outsource these people very easily in your budget. But before that, you have to know what exactly is required from the freelancer. If not, you will keep paying them and probably not even get what you want because you are not sure about what you really want. In that sense, in today's video, we are going to see two segments. One is the terminologies that you should understand during the design phase, and in this segment 2, I will show you how to create a basic wireframe which you can give it to the designer and get the work done in very short time. Let's get into the video. And before that, if you are watching this video without subscribing to this channel, definitely subscribe so you will not miss any part of starting your own side project. Let's get into the video. Number 1, the UI designer or the product designer or visual designer or web designer. I think there are quite a lot of terminologies, and of course I have to accept there are some differences and nuances related to these roles. But at this stage, at this point of your time, you don't have to confuse between all this and take it as UI designer or UI, which is user interface. The connection that you see between you and the code is the user interface, where you are able to go click OK, where you are able to go click submit or make the payment now or whatever. So all the colors and the beautiful visual design that you see is the UI designing. UX designing, I think there's quite a lot of confusion between UI and UX. It's completely different. Still people kind of get confused, and you will find UI plus UX designers in startups and much smaller companies because where you cannot afford to have multiple designers, or the whole element is much smaller that the one person can take care of both UI and UX. UX designing is all about designing the whole experience. Now they also call themselves as product designers, where you will figure out how the user will feel when they come inside. I strongly suggest, no matter which background you are from, think like a UX designer before starting your project. Like how you want the user to feel like when they are looking into your application or website or your community page or whatever it is. How do you want to design the whole experience is something that needs to be figured out by the user experience designer. But at this stage, I think you can find someone who can do both of this. The third important terminology is wireframes. I think wireframes is nothing but a representation, a visual representation of your website or app, like wires with no colors, with no glitters or no actual thing. It's probably how it is going to look, or how it is probably like a plan before you construct the whole house. This is usually done by the UX designer through various apps and various online tools. There are quite a lot of tools to really do this, and I suggest you to do this because it's very easy, because you know the product like anybody else, and it makes the designers and developers to understand what they exactly want. And in today's video, towards the end, I'm going to show you how to quickly and easily create a wireframe by yourself. The next one is prototype. So there's always a confusion between mockup, wireframe and prototype. Prototype is nothing but it will pretty much, at least 80%, look like the actual website. It will interact to you, like, you will be able to go click and see what next is going to happen. Prototype is usually done by various tools like Azure, Balsamic, and quite a lot of tools you have, Figma, Adobe XD, a lot of tools. But you don't have to sweat so much learning these tools to create a prototype. I think you can give this work to the freelancer if you are not very sure about designing, because it's probably a little draining to learn these tools, though they are very simple. I think you should invest more on the product and how are you going to take it to the market. The next one is mockup. It's a very used terminology, so I had to tell you. The mockup can be even the wireframes or the prototype on how exactly your website is going to look like. Just a mock-up of what is going to come through, and this is something that you will show to the investors and probably your friends, or you can also show this to the potential users or future users and show them and get a feedback about what they feel about. This is usually called user research that people do in the user research phase. But since you might not have a lot of budget from the wireframe after the prototype is done, you can take this mock-up and show it to people and get their live feedback and think about iteration, think about pivoting, because at this point of time you do not have much to lose and you can change quite a lot in this mock-up and then pivot and then go for the development phase, which is actually a little expensive. The next one is Sitemap, which is, you can always see a screen. It might have many interactivity. What needs to happen when you click OK? What needs to happen when you click submit? What needs to happen when you click close? Should it go to the home screen, or should that go to the cart page, or should that land you in some other screen where you show some interactions? So this is pretty confusing, and if you leave it to the developers, they might develop in however they want. So sitemap is very important when you are creating your prototype itself. It is a representation, looks like a box, looks like a chart, which will basically give an idea of on the event of clicking this will happen. So it gives a very good clarity on what can be expected from this whole prototype. Next is Storyboard. I think it's a very traditional way of looking at the screens, like people who came from mainstream media, movies, and they were making newspapers, they were designing newspapers. Like for example, I was working in a newspaper industry where the same designs were done through storyboarding, where they used to design, plan, make a storyboard and then design it in multiple tools and then come out. So this is a very traditional way. If somebody is talking about storyboarding during the design, then you have to be a little cautious. They might be a little old school. The next term is persona. Persona is an ideal user of your product. In our case, we've been doing it with a product for cycle, renting a cycle. Who will be an ideal user for renting a cycle? Who is probably a millennial or a Generation Z who is more worried about their health and fitness, who wants to hire some high variety or high graded cycles for riding from this place to that place, which is long run, and you can make this as one person. Let's call them, his name is Prabha and he loves cycling and he loves to go from Chennai to Pondicherry, Chennai to Chengalpattu on every week basis, and he likes to try out new cycles, though he owns some cycles which is different variety of cycles which can go uphill, which can come downhill, which has multiple gear. You can come up with a designer, have an ideal potential future user who might like and dislike this product. This gives an idea on when you are designing the whole product, because otherwise it becomes like some people like it, some people like that, some people hire it monthly once, some people hire it yearly once. So it goes on a dilution and you will not figure out where you want to learn. So having a persona gives a very good clarity on whom you are designing. This persona is the priority of your buyers. So you will be targeting the real important chunk of your users, and then you can go to the people who are probably hiring it once in a year or once in a month. Next term is information architecture. When it comes to information architecture, it's nothing but when you are looking into an app or a website, where did you keep the close button? Where did you keep the body? Where are you keeping the content of it? Are you keeping it upfront, or are you keeping it somewhere near the scroll, or what are you going to show it to the user? This is the information architecture. This is usually done by the user experience designer by themselves, But in this case, you can think about why you need to keep the content probably upfront or keep it somewhere down, why you need to have a picture upfront, or why you need to have a close button like somewhere there. So this information architecture gives an idea about what is the priority to your product, so that can be kept like upfront. The next term is responsive designing. So this is again widely spoken and many of us might not know, which is not bad. If you don't know, don't worry about it. That is why I'm here to tell you what it is. So we might design something like a website, but we have to understand more than 60 to 70% of the users use it through mobile. So how do you do it? Are you going to do it as an app when this can just be a website? So that is when the presence of responsive design comes into picture, where a single design can be seen on a desktop, on a laptop, on an iPad, on a phone. Everything is done, where this can be totally taken care by the developer and the designer, designing on how this needs to be designed in each and every device. Okay, cool. Now I have spoken about most of the terminologies that are used in the design phase, so you will not get lost with terms when the freelancer or a designer is talking about it. Now I'm going to the screen. I'm going to show you how to create a wireframe with a very simple and a free tool, so you will have more and more clarity about your product. So even before we go there, make sure you hit the subscribe button and have the bell icon clicked, so you will know everything about upcoming videos. And from this week, we're going to be having weekly one video on every single Friday. So look forward for it, and let's get into the screen. When it comes to creating your wireframe, it gives a lot of clarity, like I told you. For doing this, there are quite a lots and lots of tools if you go search online, starting from UX Pin, Whimsical, Lucid Chart, so many other stuff. But I'm gonna talk to you about Pidoko today. Of course, Balsamic is also a very close match. And when it goes to the prototyping phase, and if you think you can create your own prototype, then I suggest you to go with Figma, which is free, which is easy to use, which is very drag and drop model. Today I'm going to do a very quick wireframe with Pidoko. So Pidoko, you can drag and drop images from this. I'm of course doing it in a very simple term, and you have to list down all the features that you are looking for in your application and then create the wireframe, so you know what is required and what is not required. Maybe a text, and then you can have a drop down on what type of cycle you want. And then it comes with an option. And then okay. So now for your MVP, you can just pick the rent option alone. Yes, this is a very simple one which I have designed as only 2 screens. You can go ahead and then design as many as screens as you want, which will work for your screens. It is basically like doing a wireframe in the paper and pen and finding what works for you. And wherein here you can add interactions, move around the screens, and still show the developer what works for your project. So hope it helped, and I suggest you to explore Balsamic, also Figma, and figure out which suits you best. With that said, we are at the end of this video, and definitely subscribe to this channel. Like I told you, from this week it's going to be every Friday, and next week I'm going to move to the important phase of the side project or starting your own startup.